Namaskar, welcome to the module on form generation. Here we are going to discuss how to build up a form for your hospital, how to develop certain spaces according to a form oriented design practice. So we are hoping that the zoning level has been over and now we are moving on to a schematic level of development of the design.
Hope you have understood the very basic approach of form development. This is only one form, this one approach that we have told, and there are many other approaches that could be taken forward. This is how you might go on from your zoning stage to making out the form of your building that would also show a lot of your aesthetics.
So to start with, in a form development, we are using the approach of using origami as the means of developing and evolving a form. So here we have three main modules. So this is going to be the hospital block, this being the academic block, and this a cluster is going to be the residential block. To understand this, that the paraclinical departments and the preclinical departments are going to be in this block, which is the academic block. We have not defined within the residential areas what are the other spaces, as we will be focusing only on the hospital and the academic block right now. So as you can see, the hospital block right now is like a rectangle. It could also have been a square, it could have been a rectangle in the other direction. Probably it could have had been in this form, in a radial form. So these are the various ways in which it could have had been. Had it been a podium and then the tower would have been rising like that, this is another way that can be taken into it. Also, one can start opening a specific space. So there's a open double height space probably at one space and the rest is one level. And then you might want to build up on one of these zones. Various approaches can be there. Let's say that this entire area is the OPD and the emergency, which is the ground floor. Now we build upon it and probably on only one side we start building the IPD, and on top of it then we stack our next level, which is the OPD, and below all of this is the CSSD, the kitchen, the laundry, all of that can come. And now this can now be used to understand how the academic zone is going to function. We know that in the academic area there are lecture theatres majorly. So these lecture theatres can be arranged in a radial format, which means that you start placing, so if this is the shape of one lecture theatre, you start placing these multiple lecture theatres to create a radial form, and within it probably sits a courtyard. And please note that the academic area is where the paraclinical and the preclinical departments are there. In the hospital are the clinical departments. So there will be a constant connection between the two, which means there will be bridges or connectors, corridors. Like in the case of NCI Jhajjar, we saw that there are connecting flying corridors throughout. So this can happen. Then probably connections from your residential area to the academic block. Majorly you need a connection between the residential to the academic and not as much to the hospital, because people can still travel from the academic to the hospital through that way.
But it would also depend that if it's a nursing residential area or the doctor's residential area, it need not be connected through the academic block to the hospital. It can be placed on a different side as to the student's residential area and can directly connect to the hospital block. Also, the academic block, for example, in the third semester onwards, the classes that are held in the academic block do also have simultaneous clinical practice in the hospital block. Hence, you might also require connections from the academic block to the hospital at various levels and not just only at a single level.
Now coming to a detailed understanding, let's say now that we consider this not as the entire hospital building but as a ward. So how does, in a ward, how does that function? Let's say this is a linear ward with beds on one side and the nursing station on the other. So if this is my ward and I start having my nursing station on one side of it, and then there are service zones here, like the doctor's area, the store, the records area is all here. So you start building up the form of your ward. So this ward stretches throughout like that, and then there are different zones on one side. This can be one approach to the ward. The other approach could be that all of this is on one end of the ward. So this could be a different approach to the same ward. which means that these are the service areas and this is the ward area, the patient area. There can be various ways of looking at it.
So as we know, when we are designing a ward, in terms of layout, our major concern is that the nursing station should be able to have a look at every single bed and be able to visually interact with all of them so that they know if there is any case of emergency, they can approach them easily. Also, the nursing station would have its own support system, as in nurses changing room, their storage area, their own records room, and preferably on that side itself of the corridor would be other supports services as mentioned, like the doctor's room, the linen room, the washrooms, etc. There could be another possible layout of the ward, that is a radial or a circular. We'll show you a single sector of a radial block. For example, if these are particular beds, then the nursing station could be the one that is placed in the center, so that the nurses do have a 360-degree view of their entire ward. But it is also to be taken a note of that from the nursing station there should be proper circulation available to go to each ward. So if it's placed in the center, the nursing ward should not be closed from all the four sides. Also, the placement of the core with the support is also really important. If it's, for example, a singly loaded corridor, then the core can be on one of the sides, or if it's a radial path, then the core can be in the center, because when we are bringing equipments and material to the ward, there should be the movement of the equipment should not be the one that disturbs the patient. So hence it should be a little separate from the bed placements.
Now coming to a design of the OT, we know that there are certain segregations when one walks into the OT. The patient, the doctor, all of them will have separate entries to the OT. In the case of the OT, this is going to be the most sterile zone. This is the operation theatre zone, which will house the equipments required for the operation. These are the closed areas. Before that is a clean zone, where the sterilization once happens, these people can move to this zone. And before that is a protected zone. So when a patient walks in on a stretcher, let's say, he or she is brought through the protected zone, kept in the clean zone, which will have the pre-operative and the post-operative beds, and then is sterilized further, put into the medical gown and all to be taken into the OT. And on the other side, there is another space in the clean zone, which is the doctor's area, which will have the CSSD clean utility. So the doctor moves through this path, walks through this area and goes to the OT department, OT room. And then on the other side of the OT, we have the dirty utility corridor. Nowadays this has become obsolete in practice. We also have a dumb waiter system which will directly take the dirty utility from the OT down into the CSSD directly, instead of having a dirty corridor here. Otherwise this would have been a corridor. So in zoning you do understand that this is a protected zone, then there is a clean zone, then a sterile zone, and then the dirty zone.
So now, because of the dirty utility corridor being an obsolete thing and we use vertical circulation to transfer equipments, hence it is advisable to always place CSSD. So therefore, as we see in a stack diagram, that is the vertical zoning, the CSSD is generally and is in 90% cases placed exactly below the OT.
These were certain functional areas of the hospital. Now coming to aesthetics of the hospital, if I may view this as the elevation of a hospital with windows throughout and all of that, and then I have a core, let's say something like that. The core might jut out of the building to create a essence and identification for anyone who is outside the building. They could actually recognize the core and understand that the entry probably is somewhere near it. And then one might have smaller windows at one space and larger windows at the other, which means that these places require very less natural ventilation and light, protected areas like the dark area of the X-ray areas and all of that. And probably these are wards, so they require very large openings in the walls for natural light and ventilation to enter the building. Apart from that, on the facade, one might also have their service ducts jutting out, or this can be inbuilt into the facade. So all of this has to be taken into consideration while doing the design of this building.